Hey Ralph, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Jim. How are you doing?
Okay. I'm going to turn down the music a little bit, okay?
Sure, that sounds like a good plan. And in the meantime, I think it's fair to tell our listeners that today we have a guest who's going to talk to us about industrial and organizational psychology. And her name is Cassie. Say hello, Cassie.
Hello, thank you guys for inviting me to be here. My name is Cassie Stockner, soon to be Dr. Stockner, so that's very exciting. I am in the Industrial and Organizational Psychology program here at Central Michigan University. For those of you who aren't aware, industrial organizational psychology is essentially psychology applied to the workplace. So the I side, or the industrial side, refers to more business-related topics such as recruiting and selecting employees, training and development, employee performance. And the O side, or the organizational side, refers to people, or it's more worker-focused. So areas such as employee stress, well-being, motivation, things in that area.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because this is an area that a lot of people would say, well, I haven't heard of before, but it's as old as psychology itself almost. You know, we have the Wundt and Tishner and Hall, but early on we've got Hugo Munsterberger, who's sort of the father of IO psychology, and he's at the turn of the century, the 20th century.
Right.
And a guy named Taylor is into stuff called, what he calls, scientific organizations or scientific management. That was it.
Yes, yeah.
So IO psychology has been around. It's got a good history. Okay. So one of the things that we've talked about before is employee satisfaction. And going along with it is, I suppose, employee dissatisfaction.
Right.
What do you think? Just a ballpark guess. Do you think more employees are satisfied today than before, or less satisfied?
You know, it's really hard to say because a lot of these issues are very individualized. I would like to think that employees are more satisfied, but in reality, I do think we are seeing a lot more issues coming up in the workplace today, which is, causing a lot of dissatisfaction for employees.
Mm-hmm. Well, the expression back in the 60s and 70s was, quotes, going postal, which was a euphemism for workplace violence. Are we seeing much violence in the workplace? I mean, we see that out in the streets, but...
Yeah, so I don't necessarily know about violence. My research isn't in that area.
Okay.
But conflict, for sure. So that's actually one of the things that my dissertation is looking at. And we see that between 65 and 85% of employees nowadays are either witnessing or involved in conflict within the workplace.
Huh. What's the nature of go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, what define conflict for listeners? What do you mean by conflict?
Yeah, so from a research perspective, there are 3 different types of conflict that we can see occur. The first is task conflict. So this refers to disagreements over the completion of tasks or the number of tasks that are involved within a project. There is process conflict, which essentially refers to disagreements about who does what or lack thereof. And my personal favorite is relationship conflict. So these refer to disagreements or incompatibilities between workers. And so this often involves friction or personality clashes between workers, and it results in a lot of tension or animosity among team members.
Okay. Now you mentioned team. I was reading an article the other day that said that team usually gets along pretty well until a third party comes in. You and I could work together and drink coffee and eat donuts, but then all of a sudden we're tasked with something. We've got to get people not being afraid to fly anymore. And so we've got now a PR kind of thing and that's when the conflict occurs.
Yeah, so this is actually exactly what my dissertation is looking at. Surprisingly, there's not much research out there about the effect that working with a third-party client has. But just looking in general at conflict, we see that it causes increased stress in employees, decreased well-being, decreased team satisfaction, right? So when you're arguing within your team, it's hard to be satisfied with the team that you're in. And so that does have a lot of research to back it up. We're consistently seeing these results. But one of the things that I'm looking at is how those third-party clients affect these relationships. And so research has shown that those who work in organizations involving clients or customers, they're exposed to higher levels of emotional demands. And these are actually found to be the top 3 predictors for health problems.
Huh.
So third-party clients, so you're talking basically about somebody who in the organization says, I have to go out and talk to customers. So the customer is the third party.
That's one way to look at it. Another way, your dad was a law professor, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And I spent my first 5 years in a maximum security prison as a psychologist, I hasten to add. But I could talk with the custodial officers and I was in treatment and we had no problems at all. Then we throw an inmate in, and I want him handled in one way, custody wants him handled in a different way, and that's the team friction that we're seeing.
Right. So what I mainly focus on as far as defining a third-party client is, if you're working in a consulting team, let's say, and you're doing a project for a different company, there's a third-party client or representative of that company that you're working for, that you're delivering the project to. So that's the focus that I have, but I've been drawing a lot of parallels between customer interactions, like you said with your interactions, having a prisoner, just having somebody else involved creates more dynamics than working with your traditional team.
Yeah, I can see that. And, one of the things that strikes me is that things get more complicated, particularly when within the team you've got maybe 2 courses or 3 courses of action possible, and there's a debate within the team, and then you're trying to satisfy the demands of whoever the third party is. And so then everybody seems to go home stressed. And as you pointed out, that can lead to long-term health problems. One of the things that we seem to be finding now, based on some reading that I've done lately, is that exercise seems to be a good way of stress reduction for most people.
So that leads companies to put in gymnasiums and exercise places, which the employees don't use because they're so busy doing this stuff in the cubicle, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the areas in my field is organizational design. So how do we create an environment within this organization that can help employees, not necessarily in a work aspect, but their well-being? And so, like you said, a lot of tech companies now, I think, are implementing these design changes, but employees aren't necessarily using them because they are so overworked.
Yeah. It's very well to say, okay, Steve Jobs offered me a chance to come to work in sandals at 10 o'clock in the morning, and there's a gym where I work, and oh, that's great, but I come in at 10 in the morning and I'm working until midnight and I never have time to go to the gym, you know, all of these benefits are really non-benefits for me. So I
Yeah.
don't know what the answer is other than a 60-hour or 80-hour work week is not designed for actual human beings.
Right. Yeah, and I think we are seeing a shift in the workplace now. I think COVID kind of helped push this, but especially with remote work or hybrid work, you know, it doesn't help everybody necessarily, but we are seeing that some workers are happier and more productive even when they're working from home in their own environment.
Yeah, there's a pejorative term, and that's lazy girl work. Okay, but as I look at it, it looks to me like it's sort of a distributed labor. I can work for 4 or 5 hours, kind of like I work. You know, I could work for 4 or 5 hours doing research and whatever, and then I could stop for a while, take my dog to the vet, or you know, go shopping, and then pick it up. You know, oh, it's 3 o'clock. It's time to teach. Teach for a couple hours. You know, I still put in my 8-hour day, but it's an 8-hour day, kind of on the basis of what I want to do. So some autonomy, which I think is probably lacking in a lot of jobs.
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing about remote work is the flexibility. But what we're seeing is with remote work, it's more about training the managers rather than the employees. Managers
Want to manage.
Right, they want to manage.
Right.
And we've heard a lot of employees who work from home say they feel that they are constantly on the clock. You know, they can't even take a bathroom break because they're scared their manager is going to call them, and when they don't answer, they're going to think, well, I'm just not working, when that's not the case, right?
Right.
When
Yeah.
we're in the office, we're not working 24/7. We're having conversations with coworkers, we're going to the bathroom, we have normal distractions. But employees don't feel that they can have those normal distractions nowadays working from home.
I have another spin on that one too, and I'm not sure it's right, but I've heard managers saying, well, if I don't have people to manage, you know, the boss might say, I'm out of a job.
That's
So-
interesting. I have not heard anything along those lines
Okay.
yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And,
Well, welcome to Psych Takeaway.
Yeah.
I can see that because, you know, if you're a middle manager, you have to be there, not necessarily cracking the whip, but you have to be there saying, I know what my team is doing. And, you know, your boss comes to you and says, what are your teams doing? And you say, but, you know, and okay, you're obviously incompetent, you know. So it strikes me that the hybrid work is going to be a thing from here on in. But the other thing, Cassie, and maybe you can contribute your expertise to this. Is it necessary in today's world to have, say, an undergraduate degree from a major school, Harvard or Yale, or as you said at the beginning, we can train skills, we can't train character?
Right. You know, and this is a battle that we often see in hiring because there is a lot to be said about having a degree and perhaps having a degree from a particular institution, right? But at the end of the day, it's the experience that candidates have that really matters. And that can show up or be apparent in a variety of ways, right? Not necessarily just the professional experience, but life experience, right? And so earlier when we were talking, we have a lot of assessments and sometimes we look at personality, right? And so conscientiousness, or in simple terms, the ability for somebody to be organized, or not necessarily the ability, but how organized they are as a person. That's one of the biggest predictors of how an employee is going to perform on the job. And so when we were talking earlier, there are some things that you can train on, yes, but there are other areas that you just can't teach. And so that's really the foundation that we're looking for in employees.
Some of the kids that I work with in therapy have difficulty getting out of bed in the morning and staying awake during the morning and afternoon. That's going to be low in conscientiousness, right? And if you have that as kind of a pattern going into the job market, unless you can break it, and you're not going to last long, are you?
Right.
You mentioned conscientiousness. We have ocean, right? Openness is good. Conscientiousness. E is extroversion, sort of being out there a little bit. A is agreeableness.
Yes.
And N is low in neuroticism. Yeah. So a person who's not real anxious and self-blaming, that would be a good characteristic also. Yeah. Some of those are going to be difficult to train. I was doing some work for one of my classes on Freud, and he was talking about the most difficult patient he has ever had, a screaming neurotic. It was himself. Here's the father of psychoanalysis saying, you know, there's some things I can't even cure.
Right.
Well, Ralph, do you have any thoughts at this moment about success on the job?
Well, it strikes me, Jim, that, you know, of all the characteristics in the big five that we just went through, probably conscientiousness is number one. But I think, you know, we all want people around us who are agreeable. But one of the great difficulties, I think, that people have on the job now is the ability to say no.
The ability to say no, or the inability?
Well, the inability to say no.
Okay.
You know, so we have people who will take on every task.
Stuff they even know that they shouldn't be taken on.
And they say, okay, I'm agreeable, I can do that, yeah, and, you know, I'm already bent over with my load, and you're gonna throw another brick on me? Well, yeah, sure, I'll take it.
Sure.
And
In my field, hey, I can take another doctoral dissertation student. You know, sure, no problem. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that I do for my job currently is create what we call personality profiles for different jobs. And essentially what that means is I do research on the job of interest, and I create this profile and set what level of each of these personality traits is the best for this job in particular, right? And so for some jobs, we see that it is good to be highly agreeable. In other jobs, we want it a little bit lower. But in general, we do try to keep it in that mid-range because, like you said, it is really bad sometimes to be highly agreeable because you're taking on too many things, and that's going to catch up to you and affect you, sometimes even in health. At the same time, it's also really bad to be extremely disagreeable, right? Because then you can't really get anything done in the workplace, and you're going to cause a lot of relationship conflict, right?
yeah, and probably as a team member, you're going to find yourself subverting the team. You know, if you're sort of passive aggressive, you're not going to suddenly jump up and start screaming at your team, but you're going to say, okay, well, I'm just not going to do that. And
I can remember back in I guess it was the 70s, when a couple of space flights went up, but they blew up almost on the launch pad because of cold weather in Florida, right? And so engineers at Morton Thiokol knew that this was going to happen. It's documented. But the NASA team was being pushed to get the
get the launch.
get the launch done. And so people who should have said no said, go ahead, we can do it. No, didn't do it. Okay. And so sometimes being disagreeable without being, or disagreeing without being disagreeable might be a good characteristic.
Yeah.
You know, I work in an environment here at Central Michigan University in the psych department, but we don't agree on anything. But we're, for the most part, not too disagreeable either. We
Yeah.
hash things out, debate things out, and then we take a vote and we go in the direction that that we've decided upon. So that's another possibility, just having some integrity, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. So, Cassie, this has been really interesting. I wonder if you would be open to doing a second podcast with us.
Yes, I would love that.
Okay, and we'll have you back to talk more about industrial organizational psychology.
Sounds great. Thank you both for having me on today.
Well, until next time, this is Jim
And Ralph,
saying keep your stick on the ice.
because we're all in this together.